Joni dropped her heavy bag onto the grass and smiled as she drew in a long, deep, happy breath. All around her, the sounds of birds and wind through the trees, and all the other sounds of nature echoed like a chorus. She was out in the forest with her friends, and all was right with the world. Mostly. "Oh my God, is this it?" Kathi asked in disgust as she stood in the center of the campsite, wrinkling her nose at everything she saw. "I thought we were going glamping. Where's the cabin?" She scrunched her whole body in as she scanned the campsite, looking like she was afraid to touch anything. "I don't think anybody said anything about a cabin, Kathi," Amber told her, sounding a touch annoyed as she set down her pack. "We said we weren't roughing it, which to me means there's at least a roof over my head," Kathi retorted condescendingly as she dramatically bobbed her head from side to side. "There's not even a bathroom." She looked around incredulously, as though the trees themselves were somehow offensive. "That's the beauty," Amber retorted playfully, pointing at Kathi. "The bathroom is only 200 feet in any direction." She half sung the last part of her sentence, but Kathi was having none of it and just scoffed. "You could share my tent, Kat," Joni put in, trying to sound sweet. And assuage any worries. "It's not like we came out here to spend the whole time in a cabin, right?" She shrugged and offered the meager smile that she knew always disarmed her friend, and then watched Kathi melt a little. "Why did we come out here?" Colette asked half sarcastically as she stepped into the clearing, putting the cooler behind her. "To reconnect. God," Joni moaned loudly, eliciting a cackle from Colette. "Come on, guys. It's been years since we got together for anything but lunch. We've got a whole weekend. Let's make the most of it, huh?" She smirked again and passed her eyes over each of them in turn, and saw that despite anyone's mood, her affection was returned. "Fine, but I'm getting drunk," Kathi insisted as she pulled her rolling suitcase further into the clearing. She then descended the handle back into the case, sat on it, and pulled out a mango White Claw out of her purse and popped the tab. "Hell yeah," Colette agreed as she opened the cooler to reveal not only a variety of foods that she'd prepared, but a bevy of different alcoholic beverages suited to each of their tastes. She then helped Amber get the rest of the chairs out and up before grabbing them both a Corona. "I'm gonna get a fire going," Amber announced after a sip of beer, then got up and started to look around, probably for firewood. "Hold on," Kathi announced abruptly as she handed her canned beverage to Colette, then got up and threw her suitcase down to open it up. Inside was a ton of items totally unsuitable for camping, including a can of hairspray and a hairdryer. From the bag, she produced a flat canvas bag, which seemed somewhat heavy, and handed the whole thing over to Amber. "What's this?" Amber asked, confused, as she took the bag awkwardly and opened it. "What? For real?" She looked up at Kathi, suddenly pleased and a little excited. "Last time we hung out, you complained about not being able to find rocks and build a safe fire or something," Kathi explained with a shrug as she took her drink back from Colette. "One of my exes told me about it. Wouldn't shut up about it, actually. He was all rugged like you and always kept one in his truck." She made hand quotes at the mention of rugged and just shrugged again. "This is great, Kat," Amber admitted earnestly as they both shared a sincere and genuine smile. "Thank you." Joni had no idea what was inside the canvas bag, but she didn't care. This was exactly why they were out here, and she was so damned happy that this moment happened so early on in the evening. Sure," Kathi muttered a little awkwardly after a moment, but then got quiet again and took a seat in a folding chair. Amber pulled out the plate sides of whatever was in the bag, and they all watched as she began connecting the different parts. "What the hell is it?" Colette asked, somewhere between curious and annoyed, then leaned in to get a better look at Amber's construction. It's a portable fire pit. It's sick as hell, Amber explained excitedly as she clicked the last two pieces together and used an Allen wrench on her multi-tool to tighten everything together. It only took a minute to put all the pieces into place, and then she sat it between them. Now all we need is firewood, Amber noted as she got to her feet. I'm gonna go get some. I'll help, Joni offered, and got off her feet as well. Hot damn, that thing's got a damn grill, Colette pointed out, impressed. I should have brought some burgers. Well, what did you bring to eat? Kathi asked, dubiously. Something light, I hope. Like a salad? Well, I've got some sandwiches, some macaroni, and potato salads. Colette began, but teasingly paused as she waited for Kathy's stink face. And a bunch of regular, boring leafy green salads with vinaigrette for you. She smirked as the words left her mouth and reveled in the breath of relief that Kathi exhaled in response. Oh, thank God. Joni and Amber finished gathering the wood for the fire into a little pile near the chairs, while the others set up table for dinner. Colette, who was a line cook, went all out, and while there were plenty of sandwiches and other cold foods, she also prepared some delicious dishes and toted them all the way there in insulated containers. There was tandoori chicken, some of her delicious paella, and some roasted peppers and mushrooms and onions. She also, true to her word, brought Kathi no less than 6 separate salads with everything from flax seeds to leafy kale. Amber and Joni, who knew what they were doing, set up the 3 tents that they had brought, while the other 2 friends offered them a toast of thanks, but no help. After the food was laid out and the fire was going, the ladies sat down and enjoyed a nice meal together, sharing conversation and company for a good hour. As sunset approached, Amber grabbed her own pack and put it inside her tent, then laid out her sleeping bag, then came out and grabbed both Joni's pack and Kathy's suitcase to put them into their tent. As she lifted the suitcase, which was still half opened, Kathy's can of hairspray fell out of it and rolled right over to the fire. Holy shit, Amber exclaimed as she saw it, her eyes going wide. Get it! Joni got up to grab the can, but Colette was quicker and leaned over to snatch it up, then held it aloft. This shit's so terrible for the environment, for you, and it's a fire hazard, Colette scolded as she shook the can at Kathi. Well, it has an amazing hold, an extraordinary body, and quite honestly, I don't give a shit. Kathi shot back, offering a toast to Colette now. Besides, you were all over it. We all saw it. Dashing is what you were, positively dashing. Then she cocked her head to the side and nodded in satisfaction before taking another sip of booze. Joni and Amber openly laughed in response, but Colette just cracked an annoyed smile and put the hairspray into the cooler to keep it away from the fire. After Amber got everyone's stuff into the tents, with the exception of the cooler, they all settled in for a nice long sit and a good chat. They talked about everything, from Colette's new boyfriend, who's an artist and really sweet, to Amber's new job in emergency services at the local state park. To Kathy's burgeoning interest in party card games, which surprised everyone, including her. Joni went into detail about a convention she was going to in a few weeks and how her costume was almost ready. She still needed to put the finishing touches on her proton pack and purchase a USB switch, which she planned to use as the foot pedal for her ghost trap, but it was coming together. Kathi got a little jealous, as she always did, and wanted to know more about these other friends, but everyone was supportive. The quartet of friends talked well into the evening, with much laughter and good cheer, though there were a few brief spots of melancholy. Colette felt like she was never going to get a better job or move up. Amber worried about her on-again, off-again relationship with her ex, and Kathi worried about the housing market drying up. Through it all, they listened, they empathized, and they supported each other just like they always had. Joni sat back at one point, and not for the first time, wondered just how the hell they'd all become friends. They were all so very different and took different paths, but for as long as anyone could remember, they had each other. It was just that simple, and she felt very grateful for the time they all had together. As the drink started to take its toll, the hour grew late. Joni started to feel herself slipping into a comfortable sleepiness, and when she looked around, she found that all of her friends were similarly drowsy. She smiled as she stared into the flames of the campfire, trying to drink in the moment, because she knew they wouldn't have too many more like it, if any. She was so glad she organized this trip. "What the fuck?" Kathi practically shouted, as she stood up abruptly and stared into the woods behind the tents, wide-eyed. Everyone turned to see what she was looking at, but all Joni saw was a wisp of smoke, which had drifted from the campfire over to a tree and swirled a bit. She turned back to Kathi, who was still staring in that direction, looking scared out of her wits. "What was it?" Amber asked. "What did you see?" She turned from Kathi to the place she was looking, back and forth several times. I don't know exactly," Kathi admitted, suddenly confused, as she too realized that there was nothing there. It was tall, like above that first branch there, and it had like weird antlers and these white eyes. I don't know what the hell it was." She shook her head in frustration and lingering fear. "Was it a deer?" Joni asked thoughtfully as she pushed her glasses up onto her nose. "You know, maybe like standing on its hind legs?" She shrugged and peered out into the murky darkness beyond the campfire's light. "No, it was way too big to be a deer," Kathi insisted, folding her arms across her chest in a self-hug. "Could it have been a moose?" Amber asked as she stood up and grabbed the flashlight. "I don't know," Kathi admitted in exasperation and doubt. "I've never actually seen a moose." She shrugged. "Are you sure you didn't have a little too much to drink?" Colette asked as she shook her own beer bottle a little and offered Kathi a serious look. "Colette, I drink more than this on a weekday," Kathi retorted, annoyed now. "I was actually kind of dialing it back because I wanted to be present." She looked down at the ground then, suddenly distracted from her fear, which seemed to have been replaced by hurt. Joni looked to Colette, who seemed to instantly regret what she'd said. "Was it up in that branch there?" Amber asked loudly and pulled them from the roughness of the moment as she pointed to the branch in question. "Yeah, that's where I saw it," Kathi affirmed, nodding. "Its eyes were over that branch for sure." "I'm not trying to be dismissive, Kathi, but it really could have been an owl," Amber suggested reassuringly with a ginger wince. "Really?" Kathi asked. "I thought they were rather small." "No, they could be huge, especially around here," Amber insisted as she turned off her flashlight and put it away. "It could have easily been a horned owl, which, as you might expect, has big-ass horns on its head, which kind of look like antlers. They also have like these big, weird eyes. It was probably just sitting there in the tree wondering what the hell we're doing when you saw it, screamed, and it probably flew off." She nodded in an overt, almost bored manner, but maintained eye contact with Kathi the whole time. "I guess." Kathi started and then shrugged and shook her head. "You know what? That's a good explanation as any. I love you all. I think I'm gonna go to bed." She then set down her drink and stumbled around the fire, awkwardly holding her tennis shoes to head for Joni's tent. "Love you too," Joni replied gently, and her sentiment was echoed by the other two women there. As if in response, a horrible cry pierced through the night, making everyone but Amber jump and shout. "What the hell was that?" Colette demanded with wide eyes and a very nervous smile, but Amber had already started chuckling. "Bobcat!" Amber cried into the night mirthfully with another chuckle. "He's just letting us know he's about." Joni let out a breath she didn't know she was holding then, but tried to laugh along with her friend. "Oh, for God's sake!" Kathi exclaimed into the night as she continued over to the tent, but then paused right outside of it. "You know, the next time we do something like this, and I do hope there is a next time, I'm deciding where we go, and it's going to be a resort with a bar." She nodded sharply at everyone else in attendance. "Agreed," Amber conceded with an easy nod as she held up her hands helplessly. "It wasn't my idea to come out here, you know." She smirked and seemed almost pleased with the situation. Joni, whose idea was to come out into the woods, responded by pressing her chin into her chest with a big, toothy, anxious smile. But Kathi just rolled her eyes and got into the tent. "We better pack up all the food, though, and lock the cooler," Amber said to no one in particular, but Colette nodded and started putting things away. The other three ladies chatted idly while they cleaned up the area and closed away all the trash in a secure bin. Amber then took all of it into her tent to keep it away from the wildlife. "Okay, I love you guys," Colette yawned sleepily after the camp was all cleaned up. "See you in the morning." "Night," Joanne replied sweetly. "Love you." "Love you, Cole," Amber told her. "Night." Colette bent down and got inside her tent, then zipped it up, leaving Amber and Joni out by the fire. The two shared a long look, and each offered the other a warm, knowing smile. While it had been Joni's idea to go camping, she'd come up with it because of how much she and Amber loved the outdoors. Without so much as another word, they hugged in celebration of a successful trip. Even if the next 2 days were a shit show, tonight had been worth it. They held the hug for a good long minute until Amber finally let go. "Love you," Joni said with a big dumb smile. "Love you," Amber told her back with an easy grin. Then both women went into their respective tents and zipped them closed. Inside her own tent, Joni found Kathi sleeping soundly, but also found that her friend had stolen her sleeping bag. With a big sigh and another smile, Joni just laid out the blanket she'd brought on the floor of the tent next to Kathi. As Joni lay down next to her friend and folded her coat into a pillow for her head, she thought about the owl and wondered if there would be more surprises that night. She hoped the bobcat would keep quiet, and hoped even more that any bears would just steer clear of the camp. Most of all, she was just happy to be together with her friends, and tried to live in that feeling as she drifted off to sleep. Joni dreamt in visions of her and her friends together around the fire as they'd been, but instead of laughing and drinking, they were all chanting, and they were naked. The words they all spoke were in a language that she didn't understand, but seemed to speak with a fluency. In front of her, rather than the fire pit that Kathi had brought, was some kind of symbol painted on the ground, and the fire was in the center of it. As the chanting started to get louder, each of the women rose to their knees and swayed their arms back and forth in the air, their movements making the smoke of the fire dance in the darkness. Amid the chanting was a terrible deep breathing that seemed to permeate the entire area. It was as though the forest itself was alive and breathing in time with their chants. Finally, as the chanting reached the crescendo, a mass of hulking human-like figures stepped out of the woods. It was sickeningly pale with deer antlers and had glowing white eyes that stared out from behind a grotesque wooden mask. It raised its hands, which were both blackened with ages of stained blood, and held aloft a lamb, which it set in the center of the painted circle, near the fire. "Your bond is strong," a voice echoed inside Joni's head as the creature's eyes shined into the darkness. Amber stood and pulled forth a huge knife, then stepped closer to the lamb. Joni tried to scream, tried to shout out anything to her friend to stop her, but all she could do was to continue to chant. Amber lifted the knife and shouted something, a name of some kind, then brought the blade down. Just before the knife struck, the little lamb's face turned into a human being's, who cried out in absolute terror. Joni awoke with a start and looked in every direction, but it was pitch black and she couldn't see a damn thing. She reached into her front pocket and pulled out her phone to turn on the light. The tent was now filled with dim pale light that showed her pack and Kathy's suitcase. She turned the light on to Kathi then and found that she was twitching and fitful in her sleep. "Kathi," Joni whispered softly when she saw her friend in distress. "Kathi." She reached down and shook Kathi with her free hand, who woke with a start and yelped, but quieted almost immediately. "What's wrong?" Kathi asked, seriously blinking at the light, which Joni then moved away. "What is it?" "I don't know, but something is..." Joni began, but sucked in her last breath as a huge thump reverberated the entire camp. Her eyes went wide, and she gripped Kathy's hand, but didn't move a muscle otherwise. Another thump shook the entire area, and Joni choked back a whimper. Another thump, and then another, and they both heard Colette shout from her tent. Joni brought the light closer to her face and moved it closer to Kathi. When she was sure that they both could see each other, she mouthed that they needed to get out of there. Kathi nodded and reached down to put back on her yoga pants and tennis shoes, while Joni herself stuffed anything important back into her own pack and got her boots on. Just as Joni got her shoes on and went to the tent flap, an extremely loud bang rang out into the night outside the tent. It was followed by the pained cry of some terrible thing that sounded somewhere between a bobcat, an owl screech, and a human man screaming. She dropped flat then, knowing that the first sound was a gunshot, and heard both Kathi and Colette scream. "Joni?" the voice of Amber yelled from outside the tent. "Everybody get your shit together." Joni climbed to one knee and looked back at Kathi, who was scrambling toward her on all fours, her head low. She unzipped the tent flap, and the dim embers of the fire pit showed Amber standing in the center of camp, pointing a folding survival shotgun at the trees. "Amber?" Joni managed weakly as she peered out of her tent. When she made eye contact with her friend, she knew instinctively that whatever Amber had just shot was no animal, and that somehow she knew about her dream. "We need to get the hell out of here," Amber commanded seriously as she broke the action on her weapon and pulled out the spent shell. "Did you just shoot something?" Colette asked pensively as she came out of her tent on the other side of the camp. What was it?" The question was asked in a dreamy tone, as though she already knew half the answer. "I don't know, and I don't give a shit," Amber declared seriously as she snapped her shotgun together. "All I know is that we're going to grab our bags and find our way back to Kathy's truck. Then we're going to go to the ranger station." "Shouldn't we wait until dawn?" Kathi asked, concerned. "I'm not sure I'll be much good in the dark." While she seemed reluctant, she knelt down and put on her tennis shoes all the same. "No," Colette blurted somewhat abruptly as she stooped down and picked up her own pack. "We need to leave." It was only then that Joni noticed that she was holding one of her good cooking knives in a reverse grip. As a group, the women left the clearing, leaving their tents, the cooler, and even Kathy's suitcase, which she said had little of value in it. They moved off the path that they'd come in on, back towards the parking lot. Amber led the way using her flashlight to guide them all, while everyone else used the dim lights from their phones to see. As they moved along the path, Joni listened out for any sounds that might indicate that they were being followed, but the forest was eerily silent. The typical night sounds were gone, and all she could hear was the wind blowing in the branches. She'd have loved it if the bobcat would just cry out, because that would have at least been normal. Everyone was quiet as they worked their way cautiously along the path. Even Kathi and Amber made them keep a steady pace, which wasn't easy in the dark. She'd had them stop only twice when they heard a sound, but after checking and finding nothing, they pressed on. Joni wasn't sure how far they'd come, but she'd also not been sure how long it had taken them to get there. A sound pierced the night suddenly, and everyone froze. But it was not the cry of some feral beast, or even the strange wail of a creature. It was a familiar but terrifying sound. In the distance, off the path, the sound of singing, of chanting, echoed throughout the trees. The voices were numerous, far more than the four of them, and their tone was not threatening, but seductive. And Joni found herself wanting to join, wanting to tear off her clothes and run out into the woods to find them. "Your bond is strong," a horrifying voice called out from everywhere at once. "Come join your sisters." And that's when she realized that the wind she'd been hearing wasn't wind at all. It was the breathing she'd heard in her dream. It came from everywhere and nowhere, and seemed to be both far in the distance and right behind her at the same time. A distance away, she spotted a fire burning, and from the direction of the fire, she could hear the wailing of a baby. The sound terrified her. Joni looked behind her and saw as Colette swayed to the sound, herself humming the chant aloud. She reached out to grab her and tried to shake her out of whatever trance she was in, but she seemed so far away. It was like she was still standing back at the campfire and hadn't moved at all. Joni found herself torn between terror and defeat, and couldn't tell if she wanted to let go and chant the words that begged her tongue to speak them, or run screaming into the woods. She was about to simply choose the latter when three things happened at the same time. Sharp, stinging pain exploded from the side of her face as someone slapped her. Amber's shotgun fired again, and then the fire and the chanting abruptly ended. "Snap the hell out of it." Kathy's voice roared in Joni's ears as she realized she'd been standing in the same spot and not moving for some time. She looked back over to Colette, who seemed to be coming out of it. She reached out and grabbed Colette's arm, pulling her up the path, just as Kathi was doing for her. After only a few more meters, they broke through the tree line and were in the parking lot. Joni looked back, suddenly realizing that all that had just happened, the breathing, the chanting, the baby noises, all of it had taken place just inside the trees. They'd been almost out of the woods. Kathi shouted to everyone to get in as she used her keys to unlock the SUV and climbed into the driver's seat. Everyone piled into the truck and pulled their packs with them, not bothering to put them into the trunk. Kathi put the vehicle into drive and peeled out of the parking lot. She didn't stop until they reached the ranger station at the entrance to the park. Amber explained to the ranger on duty that someone had come to their camp in the night, and they didn't feel comfortable staying. She told her that she'd be back the next day for their tents, but that they were leaving. The ranger took her statement and told them that they'd all go out and check on the site in the morning. As Kathi pulled out the park entrance to take them all back to their house to stay for the night, Joni found herself once again grateful for all of her friends, especially when she started to hear the chanting and the breathing again. She knew, without any doubt, that even if they didn't hear it themselves, they'd still be supportive and empathize, just like they always had.